Hey guys, how's it going? Kripparrian here, coming at you from Brazil. That's right, I am on vacation, and we had a pretty big Path of Exile 2 announcement. We got patch notes. We have probably a pretty good understanding of what the next league will look like. I will be playing it, but right now I'm only streaming a few hours here and there, not all that much, and I will be back in early September, so I will try to stream some of the league launch, but it's, be real with you guys, it's not going to be like a 14-hour a day thing until I get home, in which case I will try to make it that, but we'll see. Sometimes things come up when we're back. Anyway, so I had a chance to go over the different patch notes, and I think I have a lot of experience with some of the changes. On one hand, I know the mechanics very well in Path of Exile 2. On the other hand, a lot of them kind of tie from Path of Exile 1 in many different ways, and I have a lot of experience with that. So I thought I would give you guys a bit of a rundown. Now, it is a rundown. If you want the full detail of the patch notes, they're there for you to check out. But I imagine most people watching this video have already watched several other people go over the patch notes, but I think I can offer a little bit of insight that probably is not going to be covered by most or any other content creators. So here we go. So just to kind of go over from the top, the really big stuff, you'll be able to hold the dodge button and sprint. If you get hit when you sprint, you get knocked over, which means you're totally screwed. This is really good because there's a lot of moments in Path of Exile 2 where there's really nothing happening. Yeah, you don't really want to do this in combat, but there's a lot of things that are, just nothing happening. You're just walking horrendously slow. This is a much needed mechanic. This is excellent. You're not going to be able to multi-socket the same skill multiple times. This does not apply to minions. You can still multi-socket minions from my understanding. So it's a minion W, and if you're playing like previously several different bells on your monk, well, you got wrecked. And there are a number of other builds that got wrecked because what a lot of people like to do is they would kind of make their character built around a single skill, and then they would have like an area of effect version of that skill with different supports, then their single target version of that skill. Now there's a lot of builds where they can use different skills for single target and AoE, which is ideal, but there are some builds that actually use the same skill, so those guys get a little bit screwed too. Overall, that is a win because we also will be able to use the same support gems on multiple skills now. So support gems are going to be highly competitive in comparing how good they are on different skills. I think overall that is good. That's kind of the system they have in Path of Exile 1, more or less. And it works out, in my opinion, better than what we have seen from Path of Exile 2. Now, there are a few other things. We're actually going to get a whole bunch of new support gems. There's going to be 40 uber support gems, I think called like lineage support gems. They drop in endgame from like bosses and just random stuff. And they're just kind of OP, honestly. They're just like super broken. And this is a pretty good mechanic because one of the really crappy things about the patch is the whole like way that you engage with maps is not really changing much. It's changing a little bit with how the bosses work and stuff. It's not changing that much. And honestly, that is kind of like one of the weakest points about Path of Exile 2. In my opinion, it's not like not fun, but it's not fun to play for like weeks on end in the existing map system with kind of just how you go through maps and you go through regions searching for like citadels and such. I don't know. It's just like, to me, it's not super addicting. The addicting part about Path of Exile 2 is making new characters. And if you play solo self-found, or even if you get one in trade, if you get one of these like uber support gems, you can either just immediately apply it to your character because you can, move support gems in and out super easy, or you can make a new character. So the new uber support gem change is really good because it kind of adds some endgame because they're not really redoing how the endgame works otherwise. So that's good. They're also for gems. Curses are generally buffed. They change how some of the mechanics work with like burn stuff, but it doesn't really matter that much, I don't think. Basically, curses are stronger, and there's no more single element curses. Like if you primarily do fire damage, you curse and reduce their fire resistance. For the elemental ones, it's just elemental weakness. It just does all three. This is a good change. It's a really good change for minion builds or builds that use multiple elements, and there are certainly builds that use multiple elements. You can have slightly more crafting options. I think people should not kid themselves and think we're going to have like a POE1 situation with crafting. No, that's not it. It's just like we kind of went from gambling to kind of only sometimes gambling, or gambling less. Gambling to gambling less. Wow. Good change? Yes, but there still leaves a lot to be desired for crafting if you are expecting a game like Path of Exile 1. Now, we maybe should not expect that because of the rudimentary options for crafting in the early stages of the Path of Exile 2 development. It seems like their goal probably will include fewer crafting options than Path of Exile 1, which allows you to make pretty much perfect items, force them out even, deterministically crafting some things is absolutely possible in Path of Exile 1. I know they're generally not a big fan of that, so we'll see where that ends up. We have a new Act 4. Now, I generally don't get into the whole lore of things all too heavy, but, I kind of want to know what happened to the Vol and Doriani and stuff. So, honestly, even from someone who doesn't really care about lore, I am pretty excited to see how that story plays out. Also, more acts means less repetition through difficulties, which is again something that they're changing. Overall, huge wins there. I think a lot of people who play Path of Exile 2 casually are really going to enjoy those changes. The weapon swap delay is gone. It was pretty small, but noticeable, and some builds actually functioned through weapon swapping. I do want to point out that I can pretty much guarantee you there's going to be some stupid exploit crazy crap with putting the weapon swap on your mouse wheel and then just scrolling it like crazy, like a million times. I am sure this is going to be abused like crazy. It's like a good thing that they're changing it, but there's no way those exploits are not going to happen, right? So I don't know. I guess you gotta take that first step. They took it, and we'll kind of deal with the mess later. Gems need a lot less stats, like 25% less stats, but 25% less stats is not like 25% less stats, because just making a build, you just get a whole bunch of stats. Just the gem requirements on the high end was actually really high. So this is a really big deal because you basically don't have to get stupid passives. You literally needed to get stupid passives on most builds just to fulfill the skill gem requirement of your character. So it's a really big deal because you probably are going to go and not need to do that, which is a bad system. So you don't have to engage with the bad system. So that is good. And it's even better because instead of getting stupid passives, you can get ones that actually do something. We're going to get 150 new notable passives. Now, the passive tree is pretty big. The class that you're playing is probably not getting a huge number of them, but the stat points that you'd otherwise be wasting on your passive tree just because you needed stats are now going to go into passives, which at least will lead into meaningful decisions that you make with your build, which is awesome. So there's also a really big change in no more micro stuns. Basically, if your chance to get stunned is so low, you just won't get stunned. Now before, you sometimes did get stunned, and getting stunned is real bad. If you got stunned on a melee character, like a warrior style character, you basically got defense checked, and defenses are not super great against everything for the warrior build type. They're great against small hits, but they're actually horrible against big hits. So you'd get defense checked and you would often die to a few fairly big hits when you would get stunned. Now you'd kind of solve these with really endgame characters or if you were an incredible player, but most people are not there yet on either of those fronts. So this is a really big change that actually favors the warrior play type quite a lot. They are changing shields and parries. You can only shield, block, and parry from the front with the active stuff. This kind of just makes sense, and don't worry about that. This thing is totally busted. So shield, block cap, and we're talking about just passive blocked, 360 degrees. It used to be 75, it's now 50. Now don't get it mixed up. If you had 50 block before, you ain't gonna have 50 block anymore. It's basically a reduction on pretty much the baseline of shields, which affects everything because percent chance to block in Path of Exile 2 works as a multiplier to the block on your shield. Or if you're playing a Warbringer, you can do a few things to kind of mess that around a little bit. So basically, that is really bad. How is it good? Well, shields now block everything except red hits, which are usually very slow, very telegraphed, usually boss abilities. And this is really good because if you are someone that used active block, we're talking about raise shield, for example, there's a few other abilities that basically give you active block. Active block is 100% chance to block. And now that blocks everything except like damage over time, of course, but a lot of things are based on the hit. So a lot of damage over time effects is just negated if you fully block the hit. Now you will only be able to active block from the front. So, that is a little bit of a nerf, but the fact that you can pretty much sit in a corner and active block almost all sorts of damage is completely crazy for characters that can do that. Warriors, they can't really do that because you need to be attacking. There are some attacks that can be used while you have active block, different ways, but is that really going to define the meta? I don't know about that. Honestly, probably not. But it does affect minion builds, because minion builds absolutely are fully online in some cases, and you can just put up your shield with active block, and you're good. And yes, you can link Unbreakable to raise shield to have a ridiculous amount of active block available to your character. We have a new defensive mechanic called Deflection. So Deflection, we don't have the full information yet, but as a concept, it's probably really strong. So Deflection is 40% less damage taken from a deflected hit and the ailments that would result from it. Now that second thing doesn't really need to be there because in Path of Exile 2, the ailments that come from hits are, I think, always based on the hit, if I'm not mistaken about that. Always based on the hit. So it's just basically the hits. The hits, 40% less damage taken. Think Spell Suppression in Path of Exile 1. Spell Suppression is a mechanic where, not to bore you guys, basically you take half the damage from a spell hit if you suppress it, and you can pretty easily get your Spell Suppression to 100%, which doubles your survivability against spells, because spells in Path of Exile 1 and in Path of Exile 2 are typically the most dangerous of things that can affect your character. So with Deflection coming in, it's not 50, you can modify it to like 56, it's 40, so it's less damage reduction. The reason I say we don't know how good it is because it does not work like Spell Suppression. It's not like you just get a percent and that's it. It's based on the accuracy of the target versus your deflection rating. They did mention that you can get your deflection rating to 100%, and there are passives that give you lucky deflection, which is probably going to be taken by a lot of players. Now, deflection as a mechanic sounds very strong to me, but we don't have the exact numbers at the time that I'm recording this video to know exactly how achievable high levels of deflection will be. We don't know. That's the answer. In terms of the warrior end of things, prepare to get nerfed. Giant Blood, which is kind of a thing where you can use two-handers in one hand and they like triple their stat requirements, it now halves the effect of strength on your character. So you just lost a bunch of life, which is bad, because if you play hammer, big hammer in one hand, life is your survivability, because it sure as hell won't be armor, even though it's getting buffed in a second. But it's no longer shield. That's right. The idea that you use Giant's Blood is like you use shield with a two-hander. Using a shield now is a massive nerf, because you don't use active block if you're playing a warrior type character. You just don't do that. You have to be attacking to do the damage. So that is a really big nerf. I think that a lot of warriors will forego shields altogether moving forward in at least some cases, possibly all cases. There are significant Ascendancy changes. I'm not going to go over all of them. Overall, it's pretty good. I do want to just bring up one Ascendancy change, because in the last league start, like, all the top players were playing Smith of Kitava, which was one of the new released warrior Ascendancies. Smith of Kitava had a few passives where instead of gaining the stats from your armor, you would get certain bonuses of your choosing. The best bonuses have been nerfed, probably. In terms of major defensive mechanics, Energy Shield is pretty much the same. Energy Shield is really overpowered, allowing you to get massive health pools energy shield pools, and chaos damage immunity if you go CI, which is insanely big in this game. That is absolutely crazy. The only thing that got worse is Iron Runes. Iron Runes are a little bit worse. Overall, I would say that ES is exactly the same. Honestly, I think it's exactly the same. It's not like a little bit worse. I think it's exactly the same because you won't need to get as many int nodes. You can just get a few more energy shield nodes, and you're losing a few percentage points off Iron Runes being worse, which you're still going to use anyway. That's it. It's pretty much the same. Evasion, which was currently the meta in the last Path of Exile 2 season, because, throwing javelins and doing ridiculous damage was kind of good, and, the evasion stuff was around the javelin stuff. That's pretty much it. That's all you need to know. So players kind of got a chance to use evasion and see how they liked it, and it turns out they did like it. So evasion is very strong in Path of Exile 2, and evasion is going to get additional ways to gain deflect, and also additional ways to get elemental damage reduction from evasion, which is crazy. Evasion is getting overall a big buff, and I can't say, given the challenges we might be facing in the next league, can't say evasion is going to be like the best in the next league, but evasion was the best in this league, and it is getting better, in my opinion, probably quite significantly better. So that is a head scratcher, because Energy Shield was really, really powerful. It's pretty much the same. Evasion was meta and really powerful, and it's getting buffed. And Armor is also getting... Oh, it's getting buffed. How about that? Armor gains armor, applies to elemental damage from hits. And some people are really stoked about this change. And I will tell you that you can throw your high expectations in the trash can, because this is completely useless. In Path of Exile 2, the elemental damage taken from hits when armor applies to it, it applies before your resistances. In Path of Exile 1, it applies after your resistances, making it really strong, making it a really strong layer with high resistances, actually, and high armor. It's kind of complementing each other. Remember, in Path of Exile and Path of Exile 2, the bigger the hit, the less percentage mitigated. Okay? So if you don't have a huge armor value, your armor mitigating elemental will pretty much mitigate nothing. So when it comes to really big, like near one-shot level stuff, I think it will actually mitigate nothing. We're talking about like single-digit percentage mitigation, like actually nothing. And against small hits, it may be fairly effective. But one of the things to consider is that small hits is kind of like life regeneration. So if you invest in the elemental damage taken from hits, armor applies to that. It's kind of like getting like 1 or 2% life regeneration. That's pretty much what we're talking about. Let's not kid ourselves. And I mention it in this particular way because one of the nerfs for Smith of Kitava is the 5% life regen node on the armor replacement is going to 3%, which honestly is probably exactly the difference you're going to get from elemental damage conversion effectively. So yeah, that is rough. Honestly, that's just bad, but it's only one Ascendancy, but it is the most popular Ascendancy when it comes to the warrior playstyle. All right, something I am pretty familiar with, minions. Big minion changes. Minions will always hit with their attacks. The way this is worded tells me that it will bypass like evasion and dodge stuff. Now, I am not sure that it will go through blocks. There are mobs that can block hits. I think they will still be able to block hits. In Path of Exile, if you block an attack, you are still getting hit, technically. You just block the damage, and by blocking the damage, you also block the ailments, kind of how that works. But that is really big because the whole accuracy thing is really stupid. It allows minion enjoyers to use spellcasting minions with melee style minions or attack based minions because you will get their full potential, not needing to go into accuracy. Now there are accuracy passives on the passive tree, and as a minion user you'd pretty much get all the minion damage stuff. So now I imagine you'll just have more minion damage stuff. So it's kind of a double buff. It's not just you don't need accuracy, it's you don't need accuracy, but like minions as a whole seem to get better passives. Very nice. Now the meta minion in the previous league was the Lightning Skeleton. The Lightning Skeleton damage is actually going up. It's like 10 or 20% or something. But the chains is going from 4 to 2. So that is 5 hits old and now 3 hits new. So that's going to make the Lightning Skeleton Mages probably the best single target, definitely the best 2 target, but their AoE clear will suck. Yeah, like really suck. Cold Mages, they used to have an ability where like a giant cold thing lobs from the sky and it just clears a whole screen with like a single frost mage. It's totally crazy. Well, that's not happening anymore. The cold mage ability is now like kind of like a damage reflect shield on the minions under your button thingy. So if you have like a few skeletons, when you drop like the frost bomb, maybe it's not dropped anymore, I don't know how it works, it pretty much makes them like ice armored, and then when they get hit, they have like a thorns damage that's based on the cold minions damage. It's like pretty confusing probably if you don't play minions. I think it just makes them suck. The point I want to get across though, and like the brutes blow up freeze now, so it's like that, honestly that's probably also bad. The point I want to get across here is they're actually nerfing minion area of effect capabilities from the permanent skeletal based minions pretty much across the board. There's no area of effect stuff that is getting buffed from the skeletal minions. Now, the best AoE clear minion was actually a Spectre, the Volguard, but it was the best because it was insanely cost effective for its abilities and stats. But Spectre costs are being rebalanced, so the hunt for the most cost effective Spectre will begin once again. I cannot tell you what it is, but there will hopefully be a Spectre out there, and they're getting buffed in damage, that will fill the void of AoE clear that the skeletal minions are losing. But overall, I think it's huge minion buffs across the board. I also want to point out that minions are getting the biggest buff to survivability of all the changes in the entire patch. If you had a similar playstyle to what I did, I basically used minions and I used active block once my minions had been engaged with the targets. That playstyle is massively buffed now because you'll be able to block nearly all hits when your shield is up. Before you couldn't block like area effects left. Now it's just all hits except like the red high telegraph attacks. But for high energy shield based summoners doing this tactic, which is kind of the idea, those red hits are still not going to one-shot you, and because they are usually very slow, very few mobs have them, and also very infrequent from the mobs that even have them, you will almost certainly regenerate your energy shield in between taking the red hits while you have active block, pretty much giving you near invincibility while you have active block, meaning that if this playstyle is the strongest, we will kind of be leaning towards a playstyle with more passive minions and not ones that use active buttons. Overall, there are lots of buffs in this patch. Like overall, the whole sum of it is we're going to be stronger, okay? Not warriors, though. No. You guys, no. Warriors? Okay, but the thing to kind of keep in mind here is that we are going to have like a new league mechanic stuff with like abyss stuff. So the new content might be ridiculously hard. This is something they like to do in Path of Exile 1 because people don't like to get nerfed. They're like, buffs for everyone. Oh, by the way, the new stuff is like way harder. Effectively, your character against it is actually worse than before. I actually think that mechanic works pretty well for them, so they're probably just going to do that again. So your characters are probably going to be a lot stronger across the board. Again, not warriors. And the new content is just going to completely destroy you. Now, if it's not going to completely destroy you, I predict that the best type of character to make is going to be a zoomy evasion-based character. Evasion already being meta, already being the fastest type of character, and getting the most buffs to its survivability. It's just like kind of a no-brainer. But if the content is actually very hard, minions are actually looking insanely good. For defeating extremely hard content, minions should do quite well. Now, if you do enjoy playing the warrior playstyle, I just like to remind you guys, this is a video game that we play. If warrior is the worst class, and you like playing warriors, what you should do is play warriors. Warriors, I think, are going to have a little bit of a different playstyle. However, basically, the defense, when you get defense checked, you are going to get destroyed now. because you're not going to have your shield, you're not going to have the passive 75 block. If you get surrounded and you're not like stunning the mobs around them, or they're not already dead, or you're not like moving past them so their attacks don't connect, if that stuff's not happening, your warrior's going to get annihilated, okay? But the ability to avoid that happening is actually better. A lot of the warrior like mace stuff is actually getting increased in damage. If you were getting more passives, you could probably increase your damage that way. So, you know, and we can't get micro stunned anymore if you have a decent enough stun threshold, which again really, really helps warrior. So the idea of getting defense checked is going to be a lot less often, making a highly active warrior playstyle possibly quite viable. So that's what I got. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed my rundown of the notes, and I have brought you a little bit more insight that you did not previously have. I will see you guys in Path of Exile 2 when it's released. Take care. Thanks for watching.